Hard to believe, but it's just under 5 weeks to go until Election Day. And the governor's race isn't the only one we're keeping an eye on this week, so let's break it down. Here to do that for us, the Common Sense Caucus is back. Joining us right in our WGN studios, Eric Zorn, a columnist at the Chicago Tribune. Read his stuff all the time. And over at the Chicago Tribune Tower is Chicago Tribune editorial board member Kristen McQuarrie. Kristen, you have had some busy times meeting with these candidates day in, day out as they come up here before you. So thanks for taking time and coming back. Let's start with the governor's race. And let me get your impressions. Barack Obama in town for Pat Quinn. Chris Christie keeps showing up for Bruce Rauner. Eric, what's your thought? Are they desperate, or is this a good thing to do?
I think they're trying to raise money and they're trying to excite their supporters. And certainly the president coming to Illinois is going to help Governor Quinn raise some money. So, yeah.
Kristen, what do you think? Sign of desperation?
No, I think he's trying to motivate his base, Pat Quinn is. Michelle Obama put out an ad for Pat Quinn as part of this whole push that encourages voters to get to the polls. And that's really, these visits are not going to draw people to Pat Quinn's side who aren't already on his side, but they're there to motivate people to actually get to the polls. And that's what Pat Quinn is going to need. He's going to need big turnout in order to win this race.
Yeah, Kristen's right. This is a Democratic state. And if Governor Quinn can get his voters to the polls, I mean, we always talk about turnout, but if you look at where the polls are in this race, most of the polls have this pretty tight. There was a poll came out yesterday that showed Governor Quinn up just slightly, and then there's another poll out today that shows Bruce Rauner up a little bit. It's all going to depend on turnout, and turnout depends on excited voters, excited constituents wanting to get out and pull that lever for you.
Let's take a look at the efforts that they have against each other right now, at least as we see them in the ads. Bruce Rauner focusing a lot on Pat Quinn's record in terms of the letting folks out early from jail and the things that happened after that. That's his attack. And Pat Quinn, of course, going after Bruce Rauner about every business deal Rauner's ever been involved in, apparently. Kristen, what's your thought? Is the character attacks, is that what they should be about?
I mean, it's not what it should be about. Pat Quinn should be talking about his record, and Bruce Rauner should be talking about moving the state forward. But no, they're both attacking each other. I'm not sure that the attacks on Rauner's businesses are continuing. You know, it's kind of a repetitive theme at this point. There's been no smoking gun. It's just a pile-on effect at this time. And the fact that Rauner's bringing up these old commercials, bringing up this old issue of Pat Quinn and the early release program, that I do think is a sign that the Rauner campaign is desperate to bring his numbers down.
Yeah, my goodness, the office of governor of Illinois is not a crime-fighting job, and this issue about the early release program in prisons 5 years ago, which ought to be a minor issue. And Kristen's right, we have major issues in this state that they're both not really talking about, like how are they going to balance the budget? And and just yesterday, for instance, Bruce Rauner was talking about, well, maybe we won't be able to have this income tax cut that he wants, that maybe we're going to have to keep the income taxes higher. He's not sure. He doesn't seem to have a plan. This underscores this fact that this guy is just not Pat Quinn.
Well, we're going to see, of course, we're getting very close to that election day. A couple of these debates will finally happen. We'll see where those attacks go and watch as their ads shape up. But as I mentioned before, Kristen, you've been living inside the Tribune editorial boardroom over there, and I want to talk about some of the other things you've been seeing. For example, you had Lisa Madigan, Illinois Attorney General, come in, and her Republican challenger, Paul Schimpf. A lot of people have already said that one's a done deal, right? Lisa Madigan's not likely to lose that race, but you gave her a tough time in that editorial board meeting.
Well, she hasn't really had competition in a while. She hasn't been vetted, and there are a lot of questions that remain. While she has a really solid record on consumer and consumer fraud issues, she hasn't gone after public corruption in the state when she initially campaigned on that really strongly in 2002. So yeah, we asked her a lot of questions about where her office has been during all of these scandals and all of these local, state, and county officials who've gone to jail during her term. Her answer basically is that her office is more of a civil office, and that she doesn't have grand jury subpoena power the power to impanel a grand jury, and so her hands are tied. That's what she says. Her opponent says that that's not the case, that the Attorney General does have a role to play in at least using the bully pulpit of the office to work against public corruption in the state.
Yeah, every time someone runs for Attorney General, even when Lisa Madigan ran, as Kristen just pointed out, they all say they're going to take on corruption, and then when they look at the office, they look at the statute, the Attorney General of Illinois is not a crime fighter. It's the state's lawyer. It handles mostly civil cases. And I'm sure that Mr. Schimpf would find the same thing happening to him, which is that he might talk a good game about corruption for a while, but he couldn't really even name any particular things of corruption that he wanted to go after. The board asked him, like, well, what specifically are you looking at? And he started going, well, I just think corruption is a big problem, and I would look at corruption. I mean, he's not ready to be Attorney General, and I don't think that Lisa Madigan is particularly worried about him.
Of course, he was a former advisor to the Saddam Hussein prosecutors, so certainly a good credential there, former military guy. Kristen, let me just ask you, I also understand that Lisa's daddy kept coming up quite a bit, and potential corruption tied to him. How'd she respond to that?
She really didn't answer questions directly. I mean, I disagree with Eric that there's no role for the Attorney General to play with public corruption, especially in this state. I mean, for her office to say nothing when we're in the middle of an IDOT patronage scandal, when we have this Neighborhood Recovery Initiative money flying out the door, and the Metra scandal over the summer involved her father, who was calling in favors to Metra. So we asked her specifically about, whether she thought her father acted improperly. She really wouldn't say. We asked her, whether or not he had ever recommended people for jobs or tried to pressure her to hire people. She eventually said no, but it took a few tries to get an answer out of her. So I think there is an inherent conflict of interest that she has to deal with as Attorney General, and having a father who, runs his business the way that he does.
Eric, what is your reaction to that? I mean, look, it's her dad, right? So what do you want her to say? She was smart enough, in my opinion, to stay out of the gubernatorial race with her dad.
She did
Speaker.
Dance around the question about what her father did with IDOT. Kristen's right, or Metra, I'm sorry. And there was a palpable unease talking about those issues, and she really wanted to stay away from them. Yeah, it's obviously not ideal to have two people from the same family so high up in state government, but she's managed, I think, to deal with it so far pretty well. And just to get back to this corruption issue, yes, it's true that the Attorney General is technically the prosecutor for the state, but there's no tradition in Illinois of attorney generals going after political corruption with any vigor.
Fair enough.
And maybe for better or worse, but they just don't do it.
All right, fair enough. Let me take a moment. Eric, start with you. Get your reaction to Oberweis and Dick Durbin. My take on it was Dick Durbin played like a man who's been in office for 30 years. He knows what he's talking about.
30 years, as Oberweis said over and over again. That's basically Oberweis's argument, which is that Durbin has been around too long, and that Oberweis is not a career politician, and Durbin is. They differ in predictable ways on issues like immigration and guns and so on. I didn't hear anything particularly surprising in that debate, and I don't think any blood was drawn on either side particularly.
Kristen, did Jim Oberweis impress you?
I would say he's gotten a lot better. He's had a lot of practice because he's run for office a number of times. So he does get a little better each time he comes before us. I think it's really tough to debate Dick Durbin because, not only has he been in office a long time, he's smart. He has institutional knowledge that any opponent running against him simply doesn't have. So when we were asking questions about international strife in Syria and Iraq, obviously we're getting more complete answers out of Dick Durbin on those issues.
But you ask Oberweis questions about things like gun control and gun laws, and Durbin was talking about his belief in universal background checks. And Oberweis was like, well, I'm not convinced. I would need to look at studies. I'm thinking this guy's running for the United States Senate, and he can't even argue with statistics about why he's in favor of or opposed to something. I just feel like he's got talking points, but not much else.
Yeah, he also faced it when he talked about immigration, where Dick Durbin said, look, Jim, why don't you just read the bill, because these various points we're talking about aren't there or are there. Let me move on and just very quickly talk about the mayoral race, just so we touch base on that. Rahm Emanuel, Kristen, continuing to raise more money through his super PAC. You'd think he's expecting an army of candidates against him. It doesn't look like that's happening.
Yes, this is his big insurance policy. He has this super PAC that is not allowed to coordinate with his campaign, but can spend a lot of money running commercials against his opponents. And that's the problem with Rahm Emanuel raising all this money. It's not so much that, Karen Lewis or Bob Fioretti, the other two candidates who are going to get in, it's not that they won't get attention and be able to draw attention to their campaigns. They will, but they won't have the money to muddy up Rahm Emanuel. They won't have the money to go on TV and talk about the crime rate in the city and the finances and the school closings and all the issues that they want to, but he will have money to muddy them up.
That's definitely true. They're already worried about Karen Lewis. I can tell that the forces behind Mayor Emanuel are worried about her. They put out a poll last week where they were trying to, they were saying, they were asking voters whether they thought there was a conflict of interest between Karen Lewis being head of the teachers union and running for mayor during a time when the contract is up for negotiation. And I think that's kind of a silly charge to level, but it was an indication to me that they're worried about her getting in the race and they want to talk her out of getting into the race. She's not officially declared yet. Kristen's right, Mayor Emanuel's going to have a lot of money to buy commercials. There's going to be a lot of media attention. It's going to be the only political story in town from November 5th until February, 25th? Is that when the election is?
Yeah, you know what, and Eric, my take on this is that what Rahm is trying to do is essentially, not have a runoff. This is about winning it all on day one and not facing a runoff.
That's really what he wants, because if someone doesn't get 50% plus one vote in February, then there's a runoff on April 7th between the top 2 vote getters. I think there's a chance that between Alderman Fioretti and Karen Lewis, they could get more than 50% of the vote and force a runoff. A chance, not a huge chance right now, but I think there's a chance. Mayor Emanuel is not beloved in this city the way, say, Richard Daley was most of his career.
Eric Zorn, Kristen McQuarrie, as always, love talking to you guys, our Common Sense Caucus, for adding some common sense to the dialogue of politics during the week. We'll see you next week. Thanks for being with me. And we'll have more politics tonight after these words. Stay with us.